"You're single, Samantha. You don't require all this space," my mother, Wendy, stated with a delicate sniff, as if revealing a profound yet somewhat inconvenient truth. We were in the kitchen, the one I had meticulously designed down to the quartz, countertops that sparkled under the recessed lighting I had helped install. By the way, my name is Samantha, and for the past 5 years, this entire beautifully renovated house had been my life's effort, my savings, my future. Penelope and Killian are getting married. You know, such wonderful news, Wendy continued, oblivious to the tension crackling around me. She gestured vaguely toward the ceiling. "So, we thought the main house for them, naturally, and you, dear, can have the attic. It's quite cozy once you clear it out." The attic, a dusty, cramped space filled with forgotten Christmas decorations and mouse droppings, was my reward. My sister Penelope soon entered, a self-satisfied smirk on her face, practically glowing, not just from her new engagement ring, which she flashed at every opportunity. "Killian and I were just discussing paint swatches for the master bedroom," she chirped, her eyes darting toward my master bedroom, the one I had fought tooth and nail with the contractor to perfect. Something a bit more us, you know? The promises they had made to invest in the family home, Sam, Dad Rocky had said 5 years ago when the house was a dilapidated wreck they couldn't afford to fix. "It'll be yours one day, a real legacy. We'll live here a bit longer." "Of course, but it's your nest egg," Wendy had cooed, painting a picture of me eventually raising my own family here. I poured everything into it, my inheritance from Grandma, every bonus, every spare weekend. I learned to plaster, tile, and negotiate with suppliers. I managed the entire gut renovation, turning this money pit into the stunning modern home it was now. My home, or so I thought. The attic, I finally managed, my voice sounding small and distant even to myself. "Don't look so glum, Samantha," Wendy said, dismissively patting my arm. "It's a perfectly good space, and you'll have your privacy." Penelope giggled. "You can pretend you're a bohemian artist up there. It'll be fun." Fun, right? The shock hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. Then came the heat, a slow, simmering rage starting in my belly and spreading out, coiling tight. My hands clenched. I wanted to scream, to rage, to smash the perfect quartz countertop. But a different thought, cold and sharp, pierced through. The red mist. If I exploded now, they'd play the victims. They'd use my anger against me. No. I let my shoulders slump, allowing the tears of betrayal and fury to spill over. "But I thought this was going to be my home," I choked out, playing the role of the heartbroken, beautiful daughter. Wendy's expression softened, but not with genuine sympathy. It was the look one gives a slightly dim-witted child. "Oh, darling. Of course, we understand it's a surprise, but Penelope needs a good start to her married life. You understand, family, don't you?" Rocky shuffled in, looking vaguely uncomfortable, unwilling to meet my gaze. "It's for the best, Sam." Penelope is so happy. His usual passive agreement, easily swayed by Wendy's iron will and Penelope's batting eyelashes. He was already rewriting history in his head. "I need a minute," I mumbled, turning away before they could see the ice forming in my gaze. I stumbled up the stairs, each step on the polished oak I had chosen feeling like a betrayal. The scent of fresh paint, the custom color I had mixed for the hallway, mocked me. I reached my bedroom, my sanctuary, the afternoon sun streaming through the large window I'd insisted on, illuminating the built-in bookshelves I had designed. Penelope wanted to paint over it, over my dead body, or perhaps over theirs, financially speaking. I walked to my desk, my movement stiff. My laptop was there, but I ignored it. Instead, I knelt and pulled out the bottom drawer, the one that locked. Inside, beneath a pile of old journals, was a thick, professionally bound document, the renovation contract, the one they had barely glanced at before signing, so eager were they for me to start pouring money and labor into their crumbling asset. I flipped through the pages, my fingers tracing the dense legal jargon my lawyer friend had meticulously crafted. My eyes landed on a particular section, a minor contingency, as I had casually described it to them at the time. A slow, dangerous smile spread across my face, a stark contrast to the tear-stained devastation I performed downstairs. They thought I was just their beautiful, slightly pathetic single daughter, the reliable workhorse they had offered the attic. Ace-tee up, dusty coffin for my dreams. I forgot. I whispered to the sunlit room, the rage now a cold, hard diamond of resolve. They forgot I was also their chief investor, and investors always expect a return. A week crawled by, a week filled with Penelope's incessant giddy chatter about wedding venues, guest lists, and most gratingly, her grand plans to freshen up the house. That dreadful gray you chose for the living room, Sam, it's just so drab. I'm thinking a nice, cheerful yellow, she announced at breakfast, not even looking at me. Killian, her fiancé, mostly nodded along, looking like a man already resigned to a lifetime of agreeing with Penelope. I bit my tongue, offering one smile and non-committal hums. Let them think I was still licking my wounds in my generous attic. Let them get comfortable. Saturday morning, the sun streamed into the kitchen, my kitchen, highlighting the subtle shimmer in the backsplash tiles I had spent a whole weekend agonizing over. Penelope was on the phone squealing about bridesmaid dresses. Wendy was flipping through a bridal magazine, occasionally sighing with contentment. Rocky was attempting to read the newspaper, though his eyes kept darting nervously toward me whenever. I moved. I placed a crisp, official-looking envelope on the quartz countertop, right next to Wendy's magazine. "Morning," I said, my voice deliberately neutral. Penelope hung up, her eyes narrowing. "What's that?" "It's for Mom and Dad," I replied, taking a seat. Wendy picked it up, a frown creasing her brow. "What is this, Samantha? More of your feelings?" She made feelings sound like a particularly unpleasant rash. "Not exactly," I said. "It's an invoice." She tore it open. Her eyes scanned the first page, then the second. The color drained from her face. Penelope, curious, leaned over her shoulder, her jaw dropping. Rocky lowered his newspaper, his gaze apprehensive. "What in God's name is this?" Wendy finally sputtered, her voice trembling. "It's an itemized bill," I explained calmly. "For the total sum of the renovations, materials, my contracted labor hours at the standard professional rate for a project. Manager and skilled laborer, of course, plus accrued interest as stipulated in the minor contingency section of our agreement." I paused, letting that sink in. You see, since the primary condition of my investment, my eventual sole ownership of this property, is being voided by your decision to give the house to Penelope, the contract requires immediate full reimbursement of all my contributions. The sum, detailed meticulously over several pages, was staggering. It represented 5 years of my life, every penny I had, and a fair market rate for the expertise I had brought to the table. It was the true cost of turning this house from a liability into a highly desirable property. Wendy's hand holding the invoice was shaking. "This is outrageous. You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm perfectly serious, Mother," I said, my voice still even. "It's all there in the contract you both signed. Page 7, subsection C, I believe, details the reimbursement clause in the event of unilateral alteration of the primary beneficiary." Penelope, who had gone from confused to incandescent with rage, finally found her voice. "You're doing this to ruin my wedding. You're just jealous," she shrieked, her face contorting. "This has nothing to do with your wedding, Penelope," I said, though a small, uncharitable part of me enjoyed the disruption to her entitled parade. "This is about a legally binding agreement being broken. I invested under specific terms. Those terms are no longer being met." Rocky had gone pale, a sickly gray color. He was staring at the total at the bottom of the final page, his mouth slightly agape. He finally seemed to grasp the magnitude of what they'd done, the reality of the piece of paper he'd likely signed without a second thought. "Samantha," he began, his voice faltering. "We never intended—" "Intentions are lovely, Dad," I cut in. "But contracts are about what's written and signed, and you both signed it." Wendy slammed the invoice down on the counter. "Don't be ridiculous, Samantha. We're your parents. You can't possibly expect us to pay you for your own family home." Her voice rose, sharp and indignant. "After all we've done for you." The ingratitude. I met her furious gaze, my own cool and unwavering. The mask of the devastated daughter was gone, replaced by the calm demeanor of a creditor. "Actually, Mother," I replied, my voice dropping slightly, carrying the weight of undeniable fact. "According to this legally binding document you both signed, I can and I do. You have 30 days to settle the full amount." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. broken only by Penelope's sharp, indrawn breath and the rustle of the invoice as Rocky picked it up with a trembling hand. The cheerful yellow Penelope had envisioned for the living. Room suddenly seemed a long way off. The fallout was immediate and frankly predictable. Wendy, never one to take responsibility, launched a full-scale smear campaign. Suddenly, I was the villain of every family anecdote, the heartless, grasping daughter holding her loving parents hostage. Aunt Carol called, her voice dripping with disapproval. "Samantha, dear, your mother is so distressed. Surely you can see this is tearing the family apart. Money isn't everything." "No, Aunt Carol," I replied, my tone polite but firm. "It isn't, but agreements are, and so is the 5 years of my life and my entire savings I poured into that house based on those agreements." She huffed and hung up. Cousin Mark, who had once asked me for a loan he never repaid, cornered me at the supermarket. "Heard you're trying to bleed your parents dry, Sam. Not a good look." I just stared at him until he shuffled away, muttering. The cold shoulders and judgmental looks became my new normal. It stung. I won't lie. But it solidified my resolve. They could whisper all they wanted. I had the contract. One evening, my phone buzzed. It was Brooklyn, my older brother. He'd always been a bit of a ghost in family dramas, preferring to keep his distance. "Sam, it's Brooklyn." His voice was hesitant. "Mom called. Well, you can imagine, I'm sure." "She gave you her version," I said, trying to keep the weariness out of my voice. "Yeah," he said, a pause. "Look, I'm not calling to pick sides, but what exactly happened?" Her story was a little dramatic, so I told him. I laid out the promises, the years of work, the casual dismissal, the offer of the attic. I told him about the invoice. He listened silently, which for Brooklyn was saying a lot. "Wow," he said when I finished. "They really offered you the attic with a straight face?" I confirmed. "And this contract? It's legit?" "Aaron Phillips helped me draft it. It's ironclad." Another pause. "Okay," Brooklyn said slowly. "I get it. That's rough, Sam. Really rough." He didn't condemn me. He didn't offer solutions. He just sounded genuinely troubled by our parents' actions. It was a small crack of light in the wall of family disapproval. Meanwhile, back at the house, which I was still living in, an increasingly awkward situation, Penelope was on a mission to assert her dominance. It started small. My favorite mug, the one I'd had since college, accidentally got broken. The plants I'd carefully nurtured on the kitchen windowsill were moved to a dark corner, where they promptly began to wilt. Then, I came home from work one afternoon to find her in the hallway, a paint roller in hand, a can of garish turquoise paint at her feet. She was painting over the beautiful, intricate mural of a forest scene I'd spent weeks creating on the main feature wall. It had been a labor of love, a focal point of the house. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Just brightening the place up. This whole thing was so depressing." Rage surged through me, hot and swift, but I remembered my strategy. "That mural is part of the property's current state, Penelope," I said, keeping my tone level. "The property that is currently subject to a significant financial claim." She finally turned, a defiant smirk on her face. "It's going to be my house. I can do what I want." "Not yet, it isn't," I replied. That evening, Killian found me in the living room. He looked uncomfortable. "Penelope told me about the disagreement," he began, choosing his words carefully. "She's pretty upset." "I can imagine," I said. "This invoice, it's a lot of money, Samantha." "It's the accurate value of my investment," I stated. He shifted his weight. "She said you put a lot of work into this place and it looks amazing, but her parents, they don't really have that kind of cash lying around, do they?" He was starting to ask the right questions, his brow furrowed with a concern that seemed more financial than familial. The next day, I walked into my bedroom to find a stack of paint swatches on my nightstand. Shades of pink and lavender, Penelope's. Preferred palette. A little note was tucked under them. "Thinking of these for the master. What do you think?" P. The audacity. It was a deliberate provocation. I sat down at my desk, pulled out my laptop, and composed an email. It was polite, almost chillingly so. Subject, potential alterations to property at 12 Maple Drive. Dear Mother, Father, and Penelope. I'm writing to gently remind you that the property at 12 Maple Drive is currently the subject of a significant financial lien. As per the invoice dated, date of invoice, any alterations, redecorations, or changes made to the property prior to the full settlement of this outstanding debt could be construed as damage to the assets securing my investment. This could further complicate the financial resolution and potentially increase the liable sum. I trust we can avoid any such complications. Sincerely, Samantha. I CC'd Aaron and hit send. Let them chew on that. The whispers and threats were one thing. Damaging my collateral was another entirely. The email CCing Aaron Esquire Phillips had the desired effect. The amateur redecorating efforts ceased immediately. Penelope's paint swatches vanished from my nightstand. The turquoise splotch in the hallway remained a monument to her thwarted ambition, but no further brightening occurred. A few days later, the atmosphere in the house, already glacial, dropped another 10 degrees. I heard Wendy on the phone in the kitchen, her voice tight with panic. But what do you mean ironclad? There must be a loophole. We're her parents. A long silence followed. Then, well, that's just unacceptable. Slam. Apparently their consultation with a lawyer, presumably one cheaper than Aaron, had not yielded the comforting dismissal of my claim they'd hoped for. The grim news I gathered from snippets of hushed, frantic conversations between Wendy and Rocky was that my contract was indeed a fortress. Panic, it turned out, made Wendy resort to her oldest trick: emotional blackmail. She cornered me while I was making coffee, her eyes red-rimmed from genuine tears or strategic onion chopping. I couldn't be sure. "Samantha, darling," she began, her voice wobbling precariously. "How can you do this to us, to your own family? We love you. Don't you love us?" I poured my coffee. "Love isn't the issue here, Mother. A broken agreement and a substantial financial debt are." "But we can't afford this," she wailed, clutching her chest dramatically. "You'll bankrupt us. We'll be out on the street. Is that what you want?" "What I want," I said, stirring my coffee, "is what I'm owed, what was promised to me, and what I worked for. You had options. You could have honored the original agreement. You chose not to." Her tears abruptly dried up. "You're a cold, heartless girl, Samantha. I don't know where we went wrong with you." She stormed off. Next came Rocky, attempting the role of mediator. He found me in the garden pulling weeds with perhaps a little more vigor than necessary. "Sam," he started, looking pained. "Your mother's very upset." "I gathered," I said, yanking out a particularly stubborn dandelion. "Look, this whole thing, it's a mess. Can't we find a compromise? Maybe we could give you a smaller amount over time for your trouble." I stopped weeding and looked at him. "My trouble, Dad? This isn't about pocket money. This is about my entire investment. 5 years of my life. My future." I quoted him a figure, something insultingly low they'd probably feel was generous. "Is that what you're suggesting?" He winced. "Well, something more manageable for us?" "No," I said flatly. "The amount is the amount. It's not negotiable." My resolve was granite. Their attempts to chip away at it with guilt and pity were only making it harder. Penelope, meanwhile, escalated from petty vandalism to full-blown meltdowns. I overheard her screaming at Killian on the phone. "She's just jealous. She's always been jealous of me. She can't stand that I have you in this beautiful house, and she has nothing." Then a slammed door and sobbing. Killian, to his credit, seemed to be growing quieter and more observant during these episodes. A few days later, a formal letter arrived. Not for me, but for my parents, from Aaron Phillips, attorney at law. It was a standard letter of demand, reiterating the debt, the terms, and the 30-day deadline, which was fast approaching. It also politely suggested that any further attempts to alter the property would be met with legal action. The letter sent Wendy into another tailspin. This time, she didn't even bother with tears. She called Aaron directly. I wasn't privy to the call, but Aaron recounted it later with a sigh. "Your mother has a remarkable vocabulary when she's angry, Sam. Mostly 4-letter words. She accused me of being in league with the devil. That's you, by the way, for trying to destroy her family." "Charming," I said. "Indeed," Aaron replied. After she finished her tirade, I presented your counteroffer. "Counteroffer?" I asked, surprised we hadn't discussed one. Aaron chuckled. Oh, it's not much of one. I told them you were willing to allow them to buy out your share for the full invoiced amount immediately. She paused for dramatic effect. Or you would be forced to enact Clause 17B of the contract. Clause 17B? I echoed, racking my brain. The contract was dense. And what, for God's sake, was Clause 17B? Wendy had apparently shrieked down the phone at Aaron. Aaron's reply, as she told me later, was calm and cool. I simply advised her to read her copy of the contract carefully, specifically page 12, paragraph 4. A new wave of frantic energy filled the house. I could hear them rustling through papers. In the study, Wendy's voice sharp with agitation and Rocky's a low murmur of anxiety. Clause 17B. Even I wasn't entirely sure what it was, but Aaron had sounded confident and a little bit gleeful. Later that evening, the silence from their side of the house was heavy and oppressive. It wasn't the silence of resolution, but the stunned silence of dawning horror. I was in the kitchen making tea when Wendy appeared in the doorway, looking deflated. The usual bluster was gone, replaced by a weary, almost frightened look. Clause 17B, she said, her voice flat. I took a slow sip of my tea. Ah, you found it. Then, if we default on repayment, she recited as if reading from an invisible script, after voiding your primary condition of ownership, you have the right to register a primary lien against this property for the total sum effective immediately. That's correct, I confirmed. It means I become the primary creditor. The house can't be sold. It can't be transferred, say, to Penelope and Killian. It can't even be significantly refinanced to pull out equity, not until my debt is settled in full. Rocky appeared behind her, looking like he hadn't slept in days. But that means we can't give it to Penelope. Not unless you pay me what you owe me first, I said, my voice devoid of triumph, just stating a fact. And given your reaction to the invoice, I suspect that's not an option you're considering. The realization hit them with the force of a physical blow. They couldn't pay me. They couldn't give the house to Penelope. They were trapped. Their grand plan, so casually hatched at my expense, had run aground on the rocks of my foresight and Aaron's legal expertise. Penelope, when she eventually got the news, likely delivered in hushed, panicked tones by Wendy, was apoplectic. I heard her shouting from her room. What do you mean we can't have the house? It's my house. Killian and I have plans. The sound of something smashing followed. Killian, who had been spending less and less time at the house, was present for this particular meltdown. I saw him later, sitting alone on the porch swing, staring into the distance. He looked thoughtful and deeply troubled. The wedding was just a few weeks away, and his dream house, the foundation of his future with Penelope, was apparently built on a financial sinkhole. He caught my eye as I walked past. "This is complicated," he said, an understatement if I ever heard one. "It didn't have to be," I replied simply. The next day, Wendy approached me again, this time with all sweetness and light. A strained, desperate smile plastered on her face. "Samantha, dear," she cooed, holding out a single sheet of paper. "We've been thinking, and we want to make things right. We've spoken to the bank about a small refinance just to get you some money up front, a gesture of goodwill." I eyed the paper suspiciously. "A gesture?" "Yes, if you could just sign this. It's just a formality for the bank so they know we're all on the same page about, the house." She was trying too hard, her eyes darting nervously. "I'll have Aaron look at it," I said, taking the paper. Her smile faltered. "Oh, there's no need for that, darling. It's very straightforward. Just a simple waiver." "Aaron will look at it," I repeated, my tone leaving no room for argument. I scanned it briefly myself. It was full of convoluted phrases, but the gist seemed to be me relinquishing a significant portion of my claim for a laughably small one-time payment, a goodwill gesture that would effectively gut my entire legal standing. I emailed a photo of it to Aaron. Her reply came back within the hour. "LOL. Seriously, do not sign this, Sam. This isn't a formality for the bank. It's a blatant attempt to trick you into forfeiting almost everything. They're trying to get you to waive your rights for pennies on the dollar." "Nice try, Wendy." Armed with Aaron's assessment, I found my mother in the living room nervously tidying already tidy surfaces. I held up the paper. "A simple waiver, Mother?" I asked, my voice dripping ice. "Or an attempt to defraud me out of hundreds? Of thousands of dollars?" Her face crumpled. The fake sweetness vanished, replaced by a cornered animal's desperation. We need some breathing room. We don't know what else to do." "You could try honesty," I suggested coldly. "You could try honoring the agreement you signed." "But this," I shook the paper. "Did you really think I was that stupid, Mother? Did you really think after everything I'd fall for such a cheap, transparent trick?" She had no answer, just stared at me, the fraudulent document fluttering in my hand like a captured moth. The game was getting uglier, and they were getting more desperate. The attempted deception with the waiver was the last straw. My patience, already worn thin, snapped. The simmering rage I'd kept carefully banked flared into a cold, decisive fury. They weren't just dismissive and entitled, they were actively trying to cheat me. "Aaron," I said into the phone later that day, "they're not going to do the right thing, are they?" "Doesn't look like it, Sam," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "They're panicking, and panicky people do stupid things. That waiver was amateur hour." "So what's next?" I asked. "Do I just wait for them to default on the 30-day notice so the lien kicks in?" "We could," Aaron said, "or we could give them one final opportunity to see reason. And if they don't take it, we escalate." "Escalate how?" "There's another clause," Aaron said, a hint of steel in her tone. "A rather elegant one, if I do say so myself. But first, the ultimatum." The next morning, another crisp envelope from Aaron Phillips, attorney at law, landed on their kitchen counter. This one contained a formal, legally drafted agreement. It acknowledged the full debt, outlined a structured repayment plan, one I knew they couldn't possibly afford, with hefty monthly installments starting immediately, and set a non-negotiable deadline of 48 hours for their signatures. "It's their last chance to do this the hard way, but still on some kind of terms," Aaron had explained. "If they sign, they admit the debt, and we have a clear path to enforcement. If they miss even one payment, if they don't sign..." She let that hang in the air. The house descended into a maelstrom of hushed arguments and frantic phone calls. Penelope's wedding plans, once a source of joyful chatter, were now a ticking time bomb. Invitations had gone out, deposits had been paid, and her dream wedding was teetering on the brink of their financial abyss. I overheard a particularly vicious argument between Penelope and Wendy. "You have to fix this, Mother," Penelope shrieked. "Killian is asking questions. He's talking about postponing. Do you know how humiliating that would be?" "What do you expect me to do, Penelope?" Wendy retorted, her voice raw with stress. "Wave a magic wand and make hundreds of thousands of dollars appear?" Then came the inevitable. They cornered Killian. I wasn't there, but Penelope recounted it to me later in a tearful, blame-filled rant, inadvertently giving me all the details. Apparently, Wendy and Rocky had suggested that he, Killian, should contribute to paying me off. "You're going to be part of this family," Wendy had reportedly said. "You'll benefit from the house, too." Killian, according to Penelope, had just stared at them, then asked a few pointed questions about their overall financial situation, the mortgage, their savings. The answers, or lack thereof, clearly hadn't reassured him. The final confrontation happened that evening. I was in my room trying to read, but the raised voices from downstairs were impossible to ignore. Killian's tone was different this time, no longer hesitant or merely troubled. It was firm, disillusioned. "I can't marry into this mess, Penelope," I heard him say, his voice carrying clearly up the stairs. "This isn't just a disagreement, this is something else. Your parents promised Samantha the house, then tried to give it to you, and now they're trying to trick her out of her money? And you expect me to bail you out?" "But Killian, I love you. We have plans," Penelope wailed. "Plans built on what, Penny? Lies? Deceit?" His voice was cold. "This wedding, this house, it all feels tainted now. I need to step back." The wedding was off, at least until this was handled properly, ethically. A door slammed. Heavy footsteps descended the stairs. The front door opened and closed with a decisive thud. Penelope's scream of pure, unadulterated rage and despair echoed through the house. It was a sound I wouldn't soon forget. Her dream life, meticulously constructed on a foundation of entitlement and her parents' willingness to sacrifice my future for hers, was crumbling before her eyes. The 48-hour deadline for the ultimatum passed in a blur of Penelope's histrionics and my parents' stunned, terrified silence. No signed agreement appeared. They hadn't even acknowledged it. My phone rang. It was Erin. "Well, Sam," she said, her voice calm and professional, but with an undercurrent I recognized. The thrill of the legal chase, the satisfaction of a well-laid plan coming to fruition. They didn't sign. "No surprise there," I said, a strange sense of calm settling over me. The anger was still there, but it was focused, purposeful energy now. "So it's time," Erin continued. "Are you ready to bring the house down, literally and figuratively?" I took a deep breath, looking around the beautiful room I had poured my heart and soul into, the room they had tried to casually snatch away, the room Penelope had wanted to paint pink. "I've never been more ready," I said. The meeting was set for the following afternoon in the living room, the one Penelope had wanted to paint a cheerful yellow. Erin was by my side, a leather briefcase resting on her lap, radiating an aura of calm, professional competence that seemed to suck all the bluster out of my parents before a word was even spoken. Wendy, Rocky, and a red-eyed, sullen Penelope sat opposite us on the sofa. I'd chosen it for its clean lines and durability. The air was thick with unspoken accusations and a heavy sense of dread. They knew this wasn't going to be a pleasant chat. "Thank you for meeting with us," Erin began, her voice polite but firm. "As you know, the deadline for signing the proposed repayment agreement has passed. Samantha has therefore instructed me to proceed with the remedies outlined in the original renovation contract." Wendy bristled. "We know about your lien, Miss Phillips. You can't force us to sell." Erin smiled faintly. But the lien, Mrs. Grant, was merely Clause 17B, a preliminary measure. We are now moving to Clause 21, the dissolution clause." Rocky croaked, his face paling further. Penelope shot him a venomous glare as if this were somehow his fault for not magically producing the money I was owed. "Indeed," Erin continued, opening her briefcase and withdrawing a copy of the contract already tabbed to the relevant page. "If you recall, or perhaps if you read it for the first time now, the renovation of this property was structured as a joint venture. Your initial contribution was the existing property in its, let's say, pre-renovated condition. Samantha's contribution was the entirety of the capital for the renovation, plus her skilled labor and project management, all meticulously documented and valued." She slid a summary sheet across the coffee table, a breakdown of my financial input versus their estimated equity in the house before I'd touched it. The disparity was stark. My numbers dwarfed theirs. "The contract clearly states," Erin went on, her voice cutting through the stunned silence, "that Samantha's primary benefit and intended outcome from this joint venture was the eventual sole ownership and residency of the improved asset, this house. By unilaterally attempting to dissolve her stake and assign that primary benefit to a third party, Penelope, without due compensation as per Clause 17, you have triggered Clause 21, irreconcilable partner dispute and default." Wendy opened her mouth, then closed it again. Even she seemed to recognize the inescapable logic of Clause 21. Erin delivered the final blow. Clause 21 stipulates that in such an event, a court-appointed third-party administrator will oversee the immediate, forced sale of the asset, this house, at current market value. Penelope gasped. "Forced sale? You can't—" "Oh, we can, dear," Erin said, not unkindly, but with absolute finality. "It's right here, signed by your parents. The proceeds from the sale will then be distributed according to the percentage of total investment, given Samantha's documented financial and labor contributions, which significantly outweigh the initial assessed value of the property pre-renovation." She let the implication hang in the air. The silence that followed was profound. It was the silence of utter, uncomprehending devastation. "So, what does that mean?" Rocky finally whispered, his voice barely audible. "It means," I said, speaking, for the first time, my voice steady, "that the house will be sold, and after the original mortgage is cleared and any fees are paid, the remaining profit will be split based on my investment. I will receive the vast majority of the proceeds. You will be left with, well, significantly less, likely not enough to buy anything comparable. You will in all probability be looking for a rental." Wendy stared at me, her face a mask of disbelief, then crumpled. Great shuddering sobs racked her body. This wasn't the strategic crying of earlier. This was the real ugly grief of someone who has lost everything and knows it's their own damn fault. Rocky just sat there, speechless, looking 20 years older than he had an hour ago. Penelope, however, found her voice. It rose in a screech. "You've ruined my life, my wedding, my house. I hate you, I hate you." She lunged forward as if to attack me, but Erin simply raised a hand, a silent, effective barrier. "I think this meeting is concluded," Erin said calmly, standing up and closing her briefcase. "You'll be hearing from the appointed administrator's office regarding viewing schedules and the sale process very shortly." We walked out, leaving them amidst the wreckage of their greed and entitlement. A week later, the for sale sign went up on the lawn, a bright, cheerful sign advertising open houses. I drove past slowly, parking across the street. Wendy, Rocky, and Penelope were standing on the porch, staring at it. Their faces were a mixture of horror, disbelief, and a dawning, terrible understanding. I allowed myself a small, tight smile. It wasn't a happy smile, not exactly, but it was a deeply, profoundly satisfying one. "The attic," I said, murmuring to the empty car. "I hope you find one with a view." The view from the bottom, looking up, can be very illuminating. The house. Sold astonishingly quickly. Turns out a meticulously renovated property in a decent neighborhood, priced to move by a court-appointed administrator, is a hot commodity. The closing was swift, handled entirely by Erin and the administrator. I didn't have to see my parents, or Penelope again through the process, which was a blessing. The wire transfer hit my account a few days after. The numbers on the screen made me blink. After all debts were cleared, including the original small mortgage my parents still had, my share was substantial. More than enough for a very fresh start, considerably more than I'd even dared to hope. The administrator, a no-nonsense woman named Miss Albright, ensured top market value. My meticulous record-keeping of every receipt, every hour, had paid off spectacularly. Their share, well, let's just say, after their portion of the remaining mortgage and fees, it wasn't much. Enough for a security deposit and first month's rent on a small, run-down apartment on the other side of town. I heard the kind of place they used to sniff at when driving through less desirable neighborhoods. Wendy, I was told by a reluctant Brooklyn, was a shadow of her former self. The imperious matriarch had crumbled. She barely spoke, just stared blankly at the peeling wallpaper of their new cramped living room. Rocky was deeply depressed, finally understanding the full weight of his passivity and Wendy's manipulations. He'd apparently tried to apologize to Brooklyn, muttering something about not seeing and letting things go too far. Brooklyn hadn't offered him much comfort. And Penelope? Oh, Penelope. Her fairy tale had imploded. Killian was long gone, having wisely dodged a cannonball, not just a bullet. The wedding was a non-event. She'd had to get a job, a real one, with a name tag and an hourly wage at a local department store. The indignity, I could only imagine, was crushing. She tried sending me a few guilt-tripping texts full of "woe is me" and how I destroyed her happiness. I read the first one, felt a flicker of something that might have been pity, if she hadn't been so relentlessly awful, and then I blocked her number. Some bridges are best left as ashes. Brooklyn maintained very sporadic, cautious contact, a text here and there. He never explicitly said, "You did the right thing," but his tone, the way he asked how I was doing, spoke volumes. He acknowledged, in his own quiet way, that I'd done what I had to do. With my newfound capital, I didn't buy another old house to pour my soul into. No, I bought a sleek, modern condo downtown. High ceilings, huge windows, a balcony with a killer city view. It was clean, bright, and entirely mine. No shared history, no ghosts of broken promises, just potential. I hired movers for the few things I'd taken from the old house. My books, my clothes, the contents of my actual bedroom, not the attic. The rest, I let go. Standing on my new balcony, a glass of crisp Sauvignon Blanc in hand, I looked out over the glittering cityscape. There was no regret, not a shred. They had sown the wind, and they had reaped the whirlwind. It wasn't about malice, not anymore. It was about consequences. The satisfaction of my meticulously planned revenge was a clean, sharp burn, cauterizing old wounds. I felt liberated, powerful. Yes, I'd lost a family, or at least the illusion of one I'd clung to for too long, but in their place, I had found myself. my strength, my worth, my ability to not just survive betrayal, but to architect its downfall. Karma, I mused, wasn't some mystical force. Sometimes it was just a well-drafted contract and the courage to enforce it. A soft breeze ruffled my hair. I raised my glass to new foundations, whispering a toast to the city, the future, and myself. They wanted to relegate me to the attic. Instead, I demolished their castle and built my own empire from the foundations they tried to steal. This whole ordeal, as painful and ugly as it had been, had taught me the true, unshakable value of self-worth and the cold, hard, and ultimately satisfying price of betrayal. And you know what? The view from up here was spectacular.